question and answer period today. Sorry. I should let you know that this session is being recorded. I think you just heard that. But I'll give you a little bit of context for this presentation. Canadian Parents for French furthers bilingualism by promoting and creating opportunities for young people, students of all kinds, to learn and use French. That's really our mandate. But if we dive in a little deeper, the CPF network states that the organization's positions on issues related specifically to French as a second language education practice, policy, and professional development, we have such statements published and stated on our website. And I'm going to run through them. There are four main ones on the national, on the CPF website. And the first one is universal access. And what it means is that in Canada, we believe that all students have the opportunity to learn French and to access French as a second language program that meets their particular needs and aspirations. So universal access. The second one is effective programs. We believe students should have access to a wide variety of effective, efficient-based French as a second language programs, evidence-based, programs from grade 1, even before that actually, junior kindergarten to grade 12 and at the post-secondary level. We also recognize, or we need to know that the community is looking at proficiency levels. And we know that the proficiency levels of the Common European Framework of Reference and French language proficiency testing, such as the DELF, that's the Diplôme d'études de langue française, are used to provide language learners, parents, educators, post-secondary institutions, and employers with a common understanding of a language learner's skill level on a continuum. And so with that, we also believe that parents and educators and everybody should be aware of the expected outcomes of proficiency levels associated with each respective FSL program. And the fourth one is leadership accountability. Education leaders, in school jurisdictions, provinces, and federal government are accountable for student achievement in French second language. And parents and community stakeholders should be actively engaged in providing feedback and helping decision makers meet their needs and aspirations. Those are the four basic position statements. They go into a little bit more of a deeper dive on the Ontario website, specifically related to French second language in Ontario, but they really cover those four basic principles. So I'm going to introduce you to Mary, because she is definitely one of those advocates that has taken many years of her life to dedicated to exactly that, influencing decision makers, gathering feedback from members and stakeholders and our volunteers and our donors, etc. Mary is currently the chair of the CPF Ontario Advocacy Committee. She has been a long-standing parent leader of the Toronto District School Board French Second Language Advisory Committee. She is currently on the Board of Governors of the Université de l'Ontario Français. She served for many years on the Ontario CPF Ontario Board of Directors, and 4 of those years as president. So I've had the opportunity to work with her in all of those capacities for quite a while. And with that, I will pass it on to Mary to take over and lead us through this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Glad to see everybody who's here today, and we only have an hour, so as our colleague Tanzila told me, cut to the mustard, get started. So I'm going to take a deep breath and do exactly that. I'm going to try to chunk this a little bit so that we have enough of a pause so you can formulate questions and put them in the chat, which will help to direct the conversation a bit, which is kind of one-sided in these things. I want to make sure that I'm covering topics that are of interest to you. So please put whatever you're thinking in the chat, and Tanzila and Bobby will monitor that and bring things to my attention as they come up. Yeah, so let's get started. So if you go to the CPF Ontario website, we have our brief about the state of FSL education in Ontario posted there, and a number of categories of information that we track and pay attention to. So I'm going to go through a couple of those key pieces of information. If you haven't already, I encourage you, in the next few days or whenever you have a moment, to pull up this report and click on read the report. And see what you can find there is, let me just double check. You've got 6 pages of, text that tell you what we think about the state of FSL education in Ontario. And this report is not only public on our website, it is the same report that we bring to decision makers in Ontario. So we have, following in the footsteps of my predecessors in these roles, Monica Ferenzi and Heather Stobel, who kind of started this work with a big, thick paper binder. We're now digitized, but the basic concept is the same. We share the same message with parents, with school board decision makers, whether that's the director of education or trustees, and also at the within the province too. We have done this, shared this report with the Minister of Francophone Affairs, the Minister of Education, the Parliamentary Assistants for Education in Ontario, and in fact, next week we will be meeting with one of the parliamentary assistants to Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, and this report forms the foundation of what we share. So a couple of key things from this report, and you can see right on your screen. Did you know that Ontario ranks 6th in participation in French immersion among the English provinces and territories? What are our benchmarks for this? We look across the country, how does Ontario fare? And one of the things I know, being a longtime Ontario resident and dealing a lot with decision makers, is we're very proud of our record in education in Ontario. And sometimes this particular fact comes as a bit of a surprise to decision makers. They think we're great at everything and all aspects are covered, done, moving forward. And but what we do find is that there continue to be barriers to access, and it holds us back. We should at least the lead province in terms of participation in French immersion is Prince Edward Island. And so why couldn't we be like Prince Edward Island? We got lots of resources and people here. We could do this if we set our minds to it. So one of the key things I'm going to before getting fully into that part of it, I want to tell you about some of the successes in FSL education in Ontario. So we have about 1.9 million students in JK to grade 12 in Ontario. And of those, about 316,000 kids do more French than the basic requirement of core French. So what we're talking about is kids who do core French from grade 10 to 12, the ones that make the choice to finish the program to the end, and also our students in French immersion and extended French. Our ideal is to have everybody doing more French than just the basic requirement to achieve the maximum amount of proficiency you can get out of your education from JK to grade 12. One of the great successes of the program is that over the last 16 years, and this is specific to French immersion, the program has grown 5% per annum each of the last 16 years. And that's a really important figure because the interesting thing is it's been really predictable, so good for decision makers to plan around. And that's something that we encourage very strongly. Plan for growth, get ready. It's definitely there. There are many things that form a strong foundation to our French second language program, so core, extended, and immersion. We have good policy documents that support the inclusion of all students in the programs. We have that's called, the main one is called the Framework for French as a Second Language in Ontario, and it has two companion documents, including students with special education needs in FSL and welcoming English language learners in FSL. And these are policy documents that CPF played a key role in terms of bringing them out. And we hope that we will also have the opportunity with the Ministry of Education to participate in renewal of these documents in the next couple of years. They're now, 10 years old, time to take another look. Education evolves, and with that, all of the documents that the Ontario government puts out regarding education get done again. So looking through the report and going on to some of the specific challenges, one of the big ones, which is probably obvious to everybody in this call, is that retention is a key issue. So not only is it about accessing the program at the beginning, that admission policies be open to all, admission to French second language programs be open to all, that nobody's excluded, that it's not too bureaucratic to do this. We want it to be as simple and easy as just showing up for kindergarten in English. The other aspect of participation in the French programs is retention to grade 12. So this is something that we monitor very carefully. Many decision makers that we talk to find it very surprising when we share this one data point that is of great concern to us. Only about 7% of kids in core French take it after grade 9. This is something that we've focused on for a long time, and you're not getting the maximum benefit, the maximum French proficiency out of that program if you drop out after grade 9. So this is something that's very important to us. And also retention in extended and immersion French, which hover around the 38% mark. And we're very concerned about children being counseled out because they have special education needs rather than being supported in the program. And the other challenges that come along with continuing in French programs, such as access to childcare before and after school. Transportation is a key thing because we all know that French programs, the intensive ones, are further away from home. And if your board isn't supporting you in getting there, that's a huge issue. In terms of making sure that participation is broad and the opportunity is equitably available to all. We're also beginning to see a lot about right to read, which ties in with the long-term work we've been doing on including students with special education needs in FSL. And we're certainly in contact with researchers who are developing ideas further on how, parents and the school system itself can support emerging readers. One of our big concerns is lotteries and capping. The most egregious example in Ontario is at the Peel District School Board. From their own reporting, we know that in the last 10 years, they have turned more than 7,000 children away from the French Immersion program. And this is something that we are continuing to focus on, searching for new solutions with, and we will certainly be discussing it with the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Education next week when we meet with her. Another ongoing concern is the constant review of FSL programs on a school board by school board basis. Ontario is unique among English-speaking provinces across the province by allowing school boards to make their own choices about how to design programs. We have a minimum bar of 50% for French immersion, and for extended from 25% to 49%. Most boards do way more, but some don't, and there is no plan in place to improve and add to the amount of French that students get in those boards. And this is a great concern to us. These reviews that boards do not necessarily achieve the objectives that we have as an organization. We find that quite frequently. And of course, there's the issue of teacher supply, recruitment, and retention, which is a shared responsibility across school boards, not only to ensure that they have the next generation of French teachers coming along to grade 12, but that their recruitment and hiring practices are exemplary, that the faculties of education are offering enough spots for the needs that we have in Ontario, and that the government of Ontario is actually tracking and doing something to ensure that the supply is continual and adequate. Okay, so I think from here, I just want to briefly touch on funding. I'm not going to delve into that too deeply because it is a very complex topic just on its own. But you should know that the federal government provides funding to the province. The province uses that, allocates that for various projects relating to supporting FSL students. And then the province also has its own FSL grants that are part of the general funding that go to Ontario students. Just so you know, that FSL per pupil allocation across the province is estimated to be $294 million. So when people say to me, well, you know, this costs too much, I was like, well, where's the money that was delivered to you to do this? And it's very difficult, well, actually impossible, to track what happens to that FSL funding when it gets given at the board level, because there's no requirement that they report specifically on expenditures related to FSL. Okay, so our Ontario education goal as set by the current government is to better prepare students with the skills, knowledge, and confidence they need to succeed in the future, whatever path they choose. Well, our organization is about ensuring that the students of Ontario have the French second language skills, not only for their own personal cognitive benefits, but also to be able to support the Francophone community, to participate in the bilingual workforce, and to basically, you know, use their French throughout their lives. So our goals as an organization dovetail very clearly with what the goals of the current government are in terms of skill-based learning. And again, something we will be discussing on and have already discussed on an ongoing basis with the current Ministry of Education. Okay, on to the next thing. Just on to the next slide there, please.
Actually, Mary, if you don't mind, it's Bobby Smith.
This is the point when I'm supposed to take a breath, right?
Yes. Yes, that would be good. No, good timing, only because we have two questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
If I may read the first one, this is from Danielle Hunter. And Danielle would like to know, how can we advocate so that the GSN money is enveloped like in other portfolios?
That is a fantastic question. It is something that CPF was advocating for when I started 20 years ago. It's a tough sell. It's a really tough sell. We need to keep talking about this. We need to be talking about how this money flows into the school board, and yet, you know, there isn't enough FSL staff centrally to support all of the FSL teachers. These kinds of examples that show that this money actually does need to be spent. One of my favorite current projects right now is called Disrupt FSL, and it's a group of educators in Ontario, secondary ones, who have reviewed resources in their schools, you know, books in the library, books in their classrooms, and so on, with a view to making these resources relevant to modern times and modern students. And, you know, to replace old books costs real money. And so that FSL money comes, but is it being applied to that? And we have to double down, and we need to keep having these conversations.
Great, well, thank you. So the next question is from R. Aubrey Houghton, who wants to know, does Ontario rank 6th because of caps to enrollment in French Immersion, or is it because not as many families apply to participate in the French Immersion program?
That's a really good question too. look, we knew that Peel was turning away kids because they have a hard cap. Peel is a big growth area in Ontario. So the fact that we got the information that, 7,000 kids were turned away over 10 years confirmed what we thought was happening, but it's not often we have access to the actual data. So I think there's a few reasons why Ontario is 6th. I think we need the support of the government to actually consider increasing participation as a key goal in French second language in immersion. They do in some ways, but some of the things that are done are pretty toothless. And so, for example, the Ministry of Education, was in charge of the Peel District School Board for the last few years. And we did bring this to the supervisor's attention. I think we were heard, but I'm not sure that any action has been taken. So I think that's a big part of it. So, and then there's, the other pieces about whether kids are excluded, and also what does happen is, as kids have more choices as they move up the ranks, how is it that their French it becomes an either or choice between their education in French as a second language and their opportunity to do IB or a special sports school or something like that. So these are all aspects that we've looked at that we think contribute to the fact that Ontario is not a leader in this. And I think there is a bit of a disconnect between strong public opinion support for increased access to French second language education, and then what actually happens when the decision makers look at this stuff. So that's a gap that we continually try to bridge in our conversations with decision makers.
Thank you.
And there's so I should just add to one thing.
Mhm.
So there's all these overt things that you can tell, like, we only accept 25% of the incoming grade ones. There's all those other small things like, well, you can't actually go to the local school because the local school is full. So we'll give you one that's further away, and then we'll give you a bus. And by the way, you might be putting a kid that's 3-year-old on a bus, and not everybody's very happy about that. So that becomes kind of like a de facto barrier. Or, it's great that you're in the French Immersion program, but the survey about before and after school care went out before you actually became part of our school community, and we don't offer it in conjunction with the busing schedule. So there's all these little things along the way that do make access hard for parents, particularly young parents. So, okay, I'm going to keep going. Can we pull up that growth chart then to show next? Okay, so enrollment in FSL programs. We have benchmarking information for school board, school board by school board in Ontario and also across Canada. And I just want to show you briefly this pie chart to give you a sense of where we were and where we are. Our concern right now is that there has been, obviously in so many ways, a negative effect from COVID. The positive is that we're having this Zoom chat, which is something we probably wouldn't have done before COVID. But in terms of enrollment and retention in FSL programs, particularly French Immersion, we're a little bit concerned about what the numbers are like over the next couple of years. We've looked closely at a couple of school boards. Enrollment was affected during COVID because parents did have real serious challenges meeting the needs of the kids in their home, because one aspect of French Immersion has always been the parents don't actually have to speak French. And what we found during COVID was, well, that may be true, and we're going to have to hang in there. But a lot of parents found that too much. So, and the pathways back into the program are not necessarily there. So where are we at right now? When you look at this pie chart, that, okay, and I know color turns out weird sometimes, but the piece of the pie that's 44%, those are the students. So this is a moment in time. These are the students in Ontario that are not taking a word of French in their daily program. So they either have not started core French yet, or they are not in a French immersion program, or they've already dropped French in grade 10. So, in terms of the data that we look at, that to me represents the opportunity we have to increase participation in French second language programs. The little green sliver is the extended French program, which is not necessarily available across the province. The big purple slice is 12%, which represents the student population JK to 12 in French immersion, such as it is in Ontario with our low bar definition of 50% of the day in French and 50% of the day in English. The big red section are core French students. The bulk of them, of course, are in the mandatory program from grade 4 to grade 9. And the turquoise, the 5.5% are the children that are in the Francophone school system. So if we could go to the next one. So this is maybe a bit of mental gymnastics here. Whoa, this is what it looked like in 2005. So you can see, focusing on that purple piece of the pie, the 5.7%, that's a significant increase in the size of French immersion programs in Ontario. And for the most part, boards have stepped up to the challenge. They've figured out teaching, having adequate teachers in space. But some have struggled more than others and have not put the resources in it that it might have needed. You can also see strong growth in the 4.3%, which is the Francophone schools, because they are also trying to grow their participation and expand their reach across Ontario. What's next here? Okay, is there anything in the chat now? Bobby, Tanzila, is there anything to bring to my attention?
Hi, Mary. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scroll on there. There is a question in the Q&A, and it's from, pardon me, oh goodness, from Mawish. Now I think that's the name. I actually can't see it right now. Oh, here it is. Yes. My apologies. Okay. So hello, thank you for arranging the session. My daughter's in Peel Board and I'm moving to London, Ontario. I'm receiving different criteria for every school in French immersion. I'm afraid she has to lose her spot in French immersion. What should I do?
Okay, well, the first thing you should do is at the end of the presentation, take down my email address and I'd be happy to help you address this on a personal level. I get many calls like this. There is a huge issue with student mobility within French immersion in Ontario, and of course, Ontario students going elsewhere in Canada because our Ontario standard is so low. So that actually is a great segue into the next slide. So can you throw that up and then you'll be able to see visually what the issue is.
Are we here? I'm sorry, I clicked a few pages ahead. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, the one with the orange bars. Perfect.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, so in Ontario, the definition of an immersion is 50% or more of the day in French. We know from research, and CPF is all about evidence-based decision-making and research informed positions. So our position is in consultation with researchers over the last 50 years is the best approach to get the maximum, and I know it's best is, best, better, best, like, okay. To achieve proficiency in French as a second language, this is the ideal. You want a front-end loaded program that has an early start and that has cumulative hours, particularly, we really focus on elementary in this, but also in secondary because we're a little shy there too, in order to give the kids the best shot at becoming fully functionally bilingual and being able to fulfill their own dreams, right? Whether the dream is to go to Université Ontario Français or Laval or over to France, whether the dream is to become a French teacher, we know that the foundation that is the kind of the clearest path to that, and there are many paths to bilingualism. This is not the only one, and we acknowledge them all. But in the school system, when you're looking at this, so you see that bar in the middle that's 3,800 hours, That's how much French a child in grade 1 to 8, 50-50 gets. Okay, so that's how much they get from grade 1 to grade 8, 3,800 hours in French. If the child is in early total immersion, so 100% French at the beginning of the program, they get 6,700 hours over the course of grade 1 to 8. So what that means, in terms of that question is, and I was talking with a parent about this last week, the other issue in this is also entry grades. Boards can make their own decision what grade to start in. We recommend start at junior kindergarten, start at the beginning, or start as early as you can manage within your own school board. But the problem is, and a family returning to Toronto from Durham starts their French immersion program in grade 1. They're returning to Toronto. The little one will go into senior kindergarten. He will have missed the entry point for JK. So he won't be able to join in the program. His 2 older siblings who were in French immersion in the TDSB then moved to Durham. This gets really complicated and unnecessarily complicated, because if we had more of a universal standard across the province, this wouldn't happen. And the example of Peel to London, I can't off the top of my head remember what London's program looks like. I know Thames Valley Public changed their entry point from kindergarten to grade 1. Will they accept a student from Peel at the end of grade 1 who's only had essentially half of the amount of French that the kids in Thames Valley had? That's up to the discretion of people at the board. And unlike the regular English program, it's not a matter of you just show up and you're going to place me. School boards can make policies, do procedures that exclude kids who are transferring. Now, on the plus side, they do bend over backwards. Most of the ones I've met to try to figure out a way to make it work. And to the credit of the Toronto District School Board or the Ottawa Carleton Board, they offer a second entry point at grade 4. Toronto Catholic has an extended French program that starts in grade 5. So it's not that there isn't another possibility, but it's not, because we don't have equivalent across the province. This is a mobility issue, and it is, again, one of those issues we'll be bringing up with the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Education next week, and we have brought it up before. But we're seeing there's a lot more movement in the province now by young families, and so we've been seeing this more and more, and it definitely needs to be addressed. Okay, just quickly to the next one. Next slide, please, Bobby. Okay, so this is what it looks like in secondary school. So if you have a French immersion high school that's full on committed and is offering a great selection of credits, those kids will do 16 out of their 30 credits for their high school diploma in French. Now, of course, learning doesn't begin and end at school. And we as parents and we as CPF strongly encourage and try to support use of French in the community. There are exchange programs and so on, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to not only have authentic situations recreated in the classroom, but the kids go out in the community and use their French in authentic situations. And particularly when you look at this and you think, okay, if the kid only does 10 out of 30 credits in French during their high school years, chances are they maybe have one French course in grade 12, and then it seems like an even bigger leap to go on and do more French at post-secondary, or even to use French in the workplace because you may be feeling a little rusty. Okay, how are we doing for time here?
Very well, Mary, it's Bobby again. That was actually perfect, that last point that you landed on. We've got a couple of comments that sort of have come together on the chat. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you. It speaks to basically the limited selection of electives and courses that students sometimes face in secondary. For example, they have like in grade 11 and 12, any electives offered in French is limited. So they stop taking French in order to get the prerequisite courses for other college, university careers offered only in English.
Yeah, so this is, this is a well-known and articulated concern with decision makers. We've certainly made that point many times over the years. I was a little bit hopeful, actually, when they when it, and setting COVID aside, everybody's got their own opinion on how online learning worked and so on. But the possibility of adding online electives in FSL, in online electives of credits given in French that might be more broad-based in terms of interest is something that holds some promise for the future. We're not sure how that's all going to work out yet. I'm a little bit concerned that the recent announcement that they now have to do a mandatory tech credit for their secondary diploma, and will school boards actually put the energy into making sure that required tech credit is also offered in French. That was the one just came out of my radar in the last few days. And then it's like staffing, and there's so many pieces that fit into this. But one of the things I think that's really important, and I know this from, being a parent myself for 31 years, you're super engaged in your school council when your kids are in elementary, and fewer parents show up when you get to high school. And actually, we need parents at school councils in high school towing along their high school students to put on the radar of the principal that there is interest in topics other than what's on offer in a high school, because that very much is a locally based decision based on staffing, what teachers are capable of teaching. And that kind of conversation really needs to happen at the local level. I mean, we'll do what we can provincially, but that push needs to be in the conversation with the principal. And there's nothing, everybody says, oh, parents have great power in this. I would actually say that high school students have great power in this, probably more than parents, and should be making what they want known to the leadership in their school. So that's not a perfect answer to the question, but we're not giving up on this, and we strongly encourage local engagement and advocacy on this. Anything else there, Bobby?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, let's move on to the next one then. So, okay, so the hours of instruction in French, I've touched on that a few times about how Ontario has this minimum standard at 50% of the day being called French Immersion. And so I just want to show you what that actually looks like. And again, this is directly off our website. So I'm going to just use the example at the top. And again, an analysis of French immersion. We don't really have to analyze how much time is in core French because that's very prescribed. It's mandatory, and that's that. Whereas French immersion, again, it's at the board's discretion how this is organized. So now this is from 2018-19, so I can tell you it needs an update because now District School Board Ontario Northeast and the Toronto District School Board will be the top two on this list, because the Toronto District School Board has moved their entry point down to junior kindergarten, and with an offer of 100% French from JK to grade 3. And part of this is in response to making sure that children have the literacy and numeracy skills to fully participate and be successful at school. And life, actually. So when you look at this, okay, so basically we phoned or checked websites and so on, and what does this look like? So just to give you this one example, so District School Board Ontario Northeast, that is what they offer. Now, we're fully aware that this is sometimes a bit of a mushy goal rather than an actual requirement. The supply teacher comes in or the prep time teacher comes in and does whatever, gym and English. That happens. I would far rather see 100% as the official position and a bit of slippage than have boards go, oh no, like we're fine with dropping it from 80 to 60% French, which is what the conversation is being had right now at Trillium Lakelands District School Board. So the figures in the other column are just to give a bit of context. So District School Board Ontario Northeast at this moment in time, their full enrollment JK to grade 12 was 6,641 kids. That's a pretty small board by Ontario standards. And 28% of those kids, 1,875, were accessing their public education via French immersion. Okay, and you can pull this list up yourself, look at your school board, how does it compare to other school boards, and you know, and how does that impact what's actually happening on the ground for your own kids. We pull up the next one. So as I mentioned, Toronto District School Board at the top of the list is now, this is where they were before because their program started in senior kindergarten. I think what you can notice overall in this listing is that, okay, there's the entry point, JKSK, grade 1. We now have a couple of outliers that are starting their French immersion program in grade 2. That is not something that CPF supports. Researchers have told us that an early start is JKSK or grade 1, and generally the earlier the better. And then you can see, well, there's Trillium Lakelands District School Board is the second one from the bottom. And with the changes they're making in September, they will now be below Hamilton Wentworth because they will be down to 60% French. So some concern certainly among the parent community there. On the next page. What we see here, there are still, and the ones at the bottom of the page, a handful of boards in Ontario that do not offer French immersion at all. In most cases, there is a public board that covers the same territory that does offer French immersion. Now, CPF Ontario supports all students in Ontario, but it does give me some solace that if indeed, you know, it's not, the board is so small or inadequately resourced to be able to do more, that there might be another option for these kids. And then on the top of the list there, you're seeing the boards that offer 50-50 starting in grade 1, and the board, Halton District School Board, which has a grade 2 start. And since this chart was created, Waterloo Region District School Board is also moving to a grade 2 start. These changes were of great concern to us because, as I said, the research-based evidence over 50 years is the best possible thing, is the earliest start, and shifting to higher grades is not something that Canadian Parents for French supports. Although we do support additional entry points at higher grades, just to be clear here. So, so for example, the grade 4 middle French immersion that's available in Ottawa, Carleton, and captures kids that might not have been in the board at the starting point for French immersion, that is a great thing. That increases accessibility of the program and can have very, very good results. Okay, how are we doing? Okay. Yeah, so you're going to get this presentation in the mail. You know where the website is, and I strongly encourage you to look at the Research and Advocacy tab. So this is our piece, you know, what is the state of FSL education in Ontario? There's also the take on it nationally, where you can look at the state of FSL education in Canada. You can look at enrollment data across Canada to see what's happening. There are endless resources related to this now that Google was invented. And I can also tell you a fun fact. Last night I was reading the paper, waiting for the kids to show up for dinner, and I checked out ChatGPT, which I don't know, very big in the news these days, and I was really curious, what would it say about French immersion? And I was gratified to see, I typed in, what are, you know, who are the biggest influences on French second language education in Ontario or something like that. And CPF was on, any version of that question I did, CPF was on the list, along with luminaries in FSL research like Jim Cummings or others. So there you go. We're here to help. I can't run into every battle that happens in Ontario, but you can know that I'm interested in hearing about what's happening on the ground around, and I bring your concerns and, your successes as well, to the attention of the Ontario government and also the federal government when we sit in on consultations related to FSL funding and support from the federal level for in all areas that provide the basis for French second language in Ontario and across the country. Well, really glad all of you came. So Bobby, are there any other comments in the chat that
Yes, actually, thanks for checking there. So we have a couple of sort of comments and questions. This is from Krishna, I believe, Krishna. Learning French in school makes or has a different impact. As a non-French background parents, how do we encourage our child to keep up the interest in learning French?
Okay. One of my all-time favorite articles was a few years ago, and it said one of the gifts that we have to give our children who are learning French as a second language is ownership of the project. So as parents, we can direct what happens and support what happens, or fund what's happening, or sign up for different options and so on. But basically what we need to do is encourage the students to, absorb two key messages, even from a very young age. Little ones are very proud of the fact that they can speak French, and they double down on being proud if it's something they know their parents can't do. We need to really support that thinking, that they are proud, they are making progress, that they are awesome in their French language learning. And the other thing is that they have to take it on, even at a very young age, to look for opportunities. And because one of the things that's great about French immersion is little kids are, can run into another little kid in French and use their French, and parents are often surprised. And to put them in a milieu outside of school that gets them hearing French and building their confidence in French is really important. And the other piece of that is that, learning a second or additional language, it's a lifelong thing. It ebbs and flows. I got my first job out of university because I could answer this phone in French, sort of. I got a lot better really fast. And then I went through a period of years where I didn't use it much. And then all of a sudden now I'm on the board of a French university and everything is in French. We just can't predict how it's going to roll out in the future. And the sooner the child takes ownership of this and thinks about how they want to use it and gets more and more opportunities to use it, the more it sticks. So I don't know if that covers the whole thing, but those are some thoughts that I have on it. You got anything else there?
Thank you, Mary. I did miss one chat comment earlier that I'll share now from Nazreen. Her first son, I guess, was rejected during the random selection. The second one is accepted. And now her daughter is in JK, and she spoke to the principal at TDSB, want her to be in the French program as well. But she was told that the random selection is the only way really to get in. And, even if you requested earlier, what should she do for her acceptance? Is there anything to do?
Let's get our CPF chapter in Peel revived and revisiting this. Now that Peel is out of supervision, there are trustees. Trustees can be our friends and our allies in changing this policy, this particular policy, which does not support the goals of the parents or the goals of our Ontario education system for, giving these kids the skills they need. So we need to, it's obviously been very difficult. COVID, one thing. Supervision by the province, another thing. The parent voice was shut out. We had no trustees to interact with. their FSL committee went kind of dormant. And, you know, we've got to get parents back engaged in this, because for 50 years, it's been the parents showing up saying, what about French? Why isn't my kid getting in? As a parent in this particular situation, I feel this most strongly because I have 3 kids. They didn't all end up doing the same thing, but I, as a parent, it was a really important core value of mine that the opportunities that each child had would be equivalent. And so sibling roles are something that CPF supports, because this puts parents in an untenable situation when at, you know, age 4 or 5, you're already, you know, part of a big system that's denying an equal opportunity to one of your children. And you can't abide by it. But the thing about sibling rules is it should really evolve to the state where it is in my community here in Toronto, where the sibling rule keeps the kids in the same building, which is, you know, really important when you're dragging kids around with snowsuits and all that stuff when they're little. But it doesn't deny them access. So you may not get your spot at your local school, but you'll get one close by, and your kids will get to go to the same school. That is at least humane. I feel that very strongly that what Peel does in terms of their policies related to this is inhumane to families. And so we need to take it on again. And, you know, we will be taking it on at the provincial level as we have, and we will continue to double down on it. But we need local parents, local CPF members to start to push for this again, because the time is now. Right. And I know parent engagement has been tough during COVID. Everybody's been hunkered down looking after their immediate issues and their immediate family. But it is time for those of us with some excess capacity to get back out there again and talk to the decision makers about this. Peel needs a plan, a growth plan, to get to the point where they can accept every student. So I invite you to take up the mantle. We have a couple of CPF chapters in Peel, and we need to get them going again and create a new generation of parent leaders who are going to push hard for this. Okay, where are we at now? Anything else?
Listen, I just want to, you know, we are wrapping up. We're at 12:56 on my clock, and I think we did a really good job. Mary, you covered all the slides, all the information that I allowed you to include in this short presentation.
Are you sure you don't want to spend the rest of the afternoon with me? I could keep going.
We have to do this in chunks. I just sent out, put in the chat that I'm really interested in continuing with perhaps a series of lunchtime webinars, if not in this calendar year, the next, well, actually this school year, the next. I always think in terms of fiscal year, which starts tomorrow, which starts April 1st. So I'm starting a new year. So I would really like to see us run a series of lunchtime webinars. So please, if there was one particular topic that Mary touched on that was of real interest and you'd like to do a deeper dive, let me know. Send it to my email address. I put it in the chat. If you're interested in other topics around FSL education, let us know. We could maybe perhaps bring in some researchers and other guest speakers who have vast amounts of expertise in different topics related to FSL education. So send us what you'd like to hear and how you'd like to learn, and communicate with us if you really have that urge to play a role and become, a member, a volunteer, a donor, if you can support French second language education in any way, but in this context, really getting involved at the school level and being a champion for French second language education. It took Mary a long time to get to the level she is, where she has such an in-depth knowledge of most of the topics. But when she started, she was a parent just like you. So
I was definitely, hey, CPF,
that's it.
can you help me with this? I don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. So I think one of the key things is if you're a kind of person like me and you want to know why is it this way and can't we do something about it? This is the way to do it. And I'm going to interrupt Betty for 1 minute to say, CPF is we are big in terms of we have lots of members across the country. We are supported by a very small staff who are extraordinarily dedicated and passionate about this topic, real champions of bilingualism. So, I certainly thank Betty and Bobby and Tanzila who are with us today. I think Rosemary's on the call too. I'm not sure who else. It's a mighty team that can support volunteers and parents in the community, but can't come in and do all the work that needs to be done. And so I do want to thank Betty for creating this and the support and so on. We love our CPF staff. They are awesome.
Wow. Okay. Well, with that, we're going to actually close out because that's a high note for me. So, thank you very much. Merci. Thank you to all of the participants and your great insights in the chat and questions. And we hope to see you again.
Take care,
everybody. Great day.
Bonne route. Bonne continuation.
Bon weekend. Bon weekend.
Bon weekend. Okay.